Yes, my name is Atle Hetland. I have dealt with Afghan refugees in Pakistan quite a bit. I'm a Norwegian by birth, but I've lived and worked outside the country for many years. Back and forth, but I worked in East Africa with refugee hosting areas, and also in Pakistan, where I first came in year 2000. Trying to do some work in the field of education for Afghan refugees in Pakistan. And Pakistan was that time one of the largest refugee hosting countries in the world, and the largest education project for refugees was in Pakistan, outside the Palestinian area. And the Palestinian area is different, and they have their own international refugee organization, UNRWA, which is the United Nations Refugee and Works Agency. But in Pakistan and in the rest of the world, when it comes to dealing with refugees, it's UNHCR, which is the United Nations Refugee Agency. And they assist with protection of refugees, and they also assist providing education and health services, and then other agencies help with food if that is needed, and with shelter. But it's always the host country that is in charge. In the case of the Afghan refugees in Pakistan, it is Pakistan that is in charge, and it's the Pakistan laws that applies, with help then from the international community, mostly through UNHCR, and also World Food Program give food assistance sometimes, and it's never enough, and refugees have to try to earn some money, although in some countries, also in Pakistan, refugees don't have work permits, so it's difficult to work in the formal sector. They can work in the informal sector and sell tomatoes and onions and do such things and earn some little peanuts, or be day laborers. And in Pakistan they would often then undercut the Pakistani day laborers and workers, who would charge a little bit more, and then for an Afghan to get a job for a few days, he would charge a bit less and would then be able to earn some little money. And then in Pakistan it's also the case that the refugees from Afghanistan receive assistance from relatives who live in other countries. They may have relatives who are foreign workers in the Arab states, or there may be refugees in America or in Europe who earn good money, so that they are able to send remittances to relatives in Pakistan. Because otherwise it would be a miracle that the Afghan refugees can actually make ends meet and live in Pakistan, also in the refugee camps. And that I should emphasize, that there are a number of refugee camps, or in Pakistan called refugee villages, and it's only they who receive assistance from the international community. Those Afghan refugees who live in the cities, in Rawalpindi or in Karachi and in other cities, also in Islamabad, I think there have been 50,000-60,000 who have lived in informal settlements and try to live as best as they can, but they don't receive any assistance from the international community. It's also important to underline that many Pakistanis help Afghan refugees. Poor Pakistanis help poor refugees. Wealthier Pakistanis may also help, and that could be that doctors, for example, give free treatment to an Afghan refugee who comes to his surgery, or it can be that somebody selling medicines doesn't charge or sells it cheaper to Afghan refugees. And also some Afghans attend normal schools, but they are not actually normal Pakistan schools, but they actually don't have the right to do so. Therefore, there are also so-called self-help schools run by Afghans living in Pakistan, run by other refugees. And some of the refugees, they are also well educated, but they cannot. Although few would be well educated, but some would, and they could run schools. And then it's also a fact that there are Afghans in Pakistan who are doing very well. They may not be refugees, but we all have heard perhaps about the transport business in Karachi, which is owned and run by Afghans, and they are doing very well, many of them. Then I should maybe say something about how many refugees Pakistan has. Over these years, since the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan on New Year's Eve, 1979, so we can say from 1980 onwards, Pakistan has hosted something like 7 million Afghan refugees over the years, which is a huge number, and Pakistan has never gotten credit for being such a fantastic host of so many people. Now it's also a fact that Pakistan could not quite say no to people coming. If people flee from the home country, it is the rule and the humanitarian law that you have to receive them, and UNHCR and other international organizations, also NGOs, try to help and try to get funds from other countries, because it's also not quite fair that a poor neighboring country or any other neighboring country pays for all the cost of hosting the refugees who come all of a sudden, and they must receive food immediately the day they come. They must receive shelter and help immediately. The international community, with you, I think UNHCR is a very good organization in many ways. They are very practical and very quick in finding solutions, but they are maybe not so good in finding long-term solutions. And then other organizations and should try to find long-term solutions. As for the Afghan refugees, I think we say that maybe up to a third of the Afghans have been displaced during the wars that have taken place since 1979 up to, or even before that time, earlier in the 70s, people were displaced. So maybe as many as 1/3 of the Afghans have been displaced within the country and abroad. Pakistan has been the major hosting country, but also Iran has hosted a huge number, sometimes actually a higher number than Pakistan. And I looked at the statistics earlier when I wrote some books about education and the history of education for Afghan refugees, and I found that in certain years there were the number was higher in Iran, and that could be up to 3 million at certain specific times. Now from Pakistan, at least 4 million, 5 million have returned home to Afghanistan, and some have come back again to Pakistan because the security situation, and for other reasons, they have come back to Pakistan. And of course, if a refugee from the mountains in Afghanistan has been away for 20 years, somebody else has taken his land, the neighbor may say, no, this land belongs, I have been cultivating this, and now how come that you are coming back here and want to claim the land now? So it is, and then such refugees, when they return home, they end up in the cities, especially in Kabul, and they become destitute and very poor there because they have nothing, unless they again have some relatives or somebody who can help them, but they would then live from handouts, not from what they can do themselves. And then I would again like to emphasize that Pakistan has been a very good host country for many refugees from Afghanistan, although it's not appreciated neither by the international community nor not always also by the Afghan themselves, because they may feel they may feel some discrimination, or that many Pakistanis say, oh no, it's time that the Afghans return home. And now finally, let me say that there is officially 1.3 million Afghan refugees in Pakistan. The number is probably the double, but then also the number of people who have returned home this year is a few 100,000, and that is much higher than the previous years, where only about 50,000 have returned home. Then we must hope that the political and the security situation in Afghanistan will be such that people can actually live at home, and we must also hope that there will be very good relations between the two close neighbors of Pakistan and Afghanistan.